Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us online today, and welcome to SCMP Conversations Education Webinar. My name is Douglas Parks, an editor at SCMP, and I will be your host. Today's topic is through-train education right for your child? Getting into a top international school in Hong Kong can be highly competitive, and many parents opt for through-train education for their child, believing this can be a long-term placement. Not only do students gain consistent learning experience from the early years to primary school into high school, but also alleviates parental anxiety. But is this the right choice for your child? Today we'll tackle this topic and pressing questions including what are the benefits of primary-only schools compared to through-train schools? How easy is it to choose a secondary school? And how do you know the time is right to change your child's school? And lastly, what are some of the challenges that students face in a through-train educational journey? To help make some sense of it all, we've invited a panel of guests to share their insights on the benefits and challenges of a through-train education. On my left is Trish Oliver, Learning and Teaching Advisor, K-13 Transition at the English Schools Foundation. Christopher Chadwick, International Section Principal at the Korean International School. And Howard Tuckett, Headmaster, Wickham Abbey School, Hong Kong. This webinar would not be possible without the generous support of the English Schools Foundation, Korean International School, and Wickham Abbey School, Hong Kong, and thanks to Top Schools for their kind support too. Before we start, please feel free to type any questions you have into the Q&A box during any time of the webinar, and we'll try to address those after the panel conversation. Trish, I'd like to start with you. What would you say defines a through-train school, at least within the context of ESF?
Thanks, Douglas, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. ESF offers a through-train or an all-through education across our 22 schools across Hong Kong. And that for us, in our context, means our students who begin in kindergarten have a smooth, seamless transition all the way through until year 13.
And Chris, how about a Korean International School?
So we operate a through-train school, one campus. So the students come in at the age of 4, which is in the UK curriculum is reception, early years, and then they leave us at year 13 to go off to their choice, whether university or gap year or whatever. So they're all together on the same campus.
Mm-hmm. Howard, is it the same at Wickham or is it different?
It's different at the moment, but it's certainly the plan that it'll be a through school. So we've started off with a primary school in Aberdeen, which is a year 1, UK year 1, so 5 years old. Currently rising to 11 and next year going through to 13. And then the plan is that we will be building a Wickham Abbey secondary school in the new territories in the next couple of years. All our other Wickham Abbeys in mainland China are through schools of the model we're discussing this morning. So we're really a work in progress, but certainly of that model, yeah.
Great. And so breaking it down step by step, what would you say are the benefits of a through-train system for the child, for the pupil? Trish.
There's many benefits to a through-train education system. I think for the student, there's the feeling that they have a real sense of belonging to not only the school, but to a system. And they develop lifelong friendships, bonds with their peers, and they have strong relationships with their teachers. So this really helps to enhance and support learning and teaching. They also benefit because the continuity of learning is very strong. So that allows for teachers to really get to know each individual student and cater to their abilities, nurture their needs, and really help promote the holistic well-being of each child.
We all in agreement?
Yeah, sure.
Very much so, yeah.
Definitely.
I think continuity is the key word.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough in my previous position in the UK, when I started there at a 14-year stint, I actually tracked a reception age, so 4-year-olds all the way through to 6th form. And my career matched their total route as a just coincidence of time. And it happened that one of my children were in that year. So the bonds between these young people that built up over all those years as they went through the challenges of becoming from a child to a teenager and through to an older teenager to university entrant. They went through it as a big homogenous group, a lot of support, and those friendships will endure for years, for their lifetimes.
I describe it to parents, new families that come to visit. I say, you've got a ticket. This is the ticket of education. And where do you want to invest it? And if you, in this school, KIS, you invest it in the fact that we are a through-trained school. What does that mean? That means we start early and finish, and it's one path, one learning journey all the way through. So we stay on the train. But the train can stop, and it can stop if there's special needs or individual attention is needed. But the idea is, as Trish pointed out, the continuity, the same ethos runs through both. So we're the same teachers, the same leadership, and we do events that encompass all the students. So they have buddies and things like that. So it's a ticket to ride, it's a ticket to get on that educational journey, but it's all in one place for us. Yeah, right?
Absolutely. I think relationships are key. As, as my colleagues here have mentioned, it gives the students an opportunity to not only have friendships in the moment, but have those lasting, everlasting friendships. And I think our alumni programs are a testament to that. So there's a strong sense of community, not just with our students, but I would say with our parents as well, and certainly with our staff.
So on that point, what would we say are the benefits for parents then? What do they gain out of this particular system?
I think there's very much a sense of community that develops. I think parents don't often realise the massive benefits that they're signing up for themselves when they undertake with these youngest children.
Yeah, sure.
But sort of 10, 12, 15 years down the line, you get to realise that you've got to know these people very well, and all these other parents who are on the same journey as yourself. Again, people in the middle of life are sensing very often for the first time in their lives, our careers are, we move around a lot, particularly as younger professionals, and sort of middle career professionals settling down with a real tight community drawn together by the school. It's a massive benefit to family life.
And I think parents, when they invest in you and say, I want to join your school or your organisation, they've got their view of what they want out of it. And sometimes it's the exam grades at the end of the journey. Sometimes it's just the care that you give. Sometimes it's just older students working with younger students as role models, as buddies. So there's a lot for parents. We try to be very clear with parents what they'll get out of their journey. But each child is an individual. And you just don't know, do you?
No.
You just don't know.
No. There's also the consistent approach, I think, that parents welcome. So there's the consistent approach to learning, there's the consistent approach to the culture and the ethos, the climate that's offered. I would also say that it's a more of a seamless transition for parents. So they don't have to go through the reapplication. They don't have to go through any further interviews. So it eases anxiety quite a lot.
And lastly then, what about schools? What are the benefits for them, for you teaching these kids from primary all the way through?
Gosh, I think our schools get to know our students extremely
well.
Extremely well.
Yeah, definitely.
And that helps to cater to their individual needs, their differences, their learning. Progression of learning is something that I think is particularly strong through a through-train system. So whether the school is on one campus or whether the campuses are separated, there's still a commitment to knowing that child very well and being able to pass that information along, and also for inter-campus events, as we've mentioned here. So there's a lot of scope for schools to get to know the child well, and when teachers know their children well, that is actually when learning blossoms, and there is a much stronger bond there.
Sure, and I think it's more prevalent now with the COVID-19 creating school closures, that the bond with the teacher has become stronger. Right, there's a lot of innovation in IT now, but there's a lot of changes. But the bond with the student is very strong now, and you could say that for any school. But the purpose of through train is that they have the kids develop security with their school, right? And they say, oh yeah, I like that school, it's a good school, the teachers are nice, the feeling of the school. I always talk to parents about feelings, how their feelings are in the school. Do they see their kid being happy on the playground? And if they do, that's one of your possible choices, right? And it's all about kids feeling that they're being cared for, they've been supported, and they've got on that learning journey.
I think the sense of ownership that people get from an extended stay at a school also supports the school. People are invested in the school.
Yes.
They're not just there for 2 or 3 years and then moving away. As they become the owners of the school, because it's theirs by the fact that they're in residence.
Yes.
So parents invest in the school, things like the supportive agencies, the various parents committees and clubs and what have you, all the sports clubs that tend to spin off on these big fixed schools. I think the length of time gives that sense of ownership, investment, and indeed enriches, as we were saying just now, enriches the alumni portion. I think people will be alumni for a lot longer than they're ever pupils, and that enriches that. It gives it such a good start.
Sort of putting you on the spot then, what are benefits of primary only schools compared to through train?
That's an interesting question, because perhaps a consideration there is, where will students go next? So to my knowledge, education doesn't stop or start at any point on the continuum. We're always learning as adults as well. So if a student finishes in year 6, their learning journey certainly isn't over. So the benefits of the through train system provide that learning progression, that continuity in learning, the getting to know the students really well, taking care of the well-being of the student, rather than it being a stop-start process.
I'm currently working in effect in what is only a primary school, because we're just at that stage. And the one benefit is, and this could benefit a through train school that is in separate buildings, the point I'm about to make, is that every dollar I spend on the resources, on the building, on whatever I'm doing for this current school, it's all about primary education. I don't have to make any compromises to share with secondary students or preschool students, kindergarten students who are sharing the same resources. And having been ahead of several schools now, where there are more than one phase in the same building, it's always a compromise, because the sixth form will want to use it and year 4 will want to use it, or whatever it is. And I think the benefit of either standalone schools or separate buildings within a through school is you can specifically maximize the use and the educational impact of the investment you make.
And I think Hong Kong's actually quite unique in its educational journeys. Many Hong Kong families, they start their choice of education very early. So at the school fair, I met some students who were only 18 months, and they were already looking for a kindergarten to take them, right? And that's the first part. That's how do I get into this kindergarten? Do you have a kindergarten? What's the next step after? When can they move to your school and all this kind of stuff? So there's already with Hong Kong parents this desire to keep moving forward with their kids, and that's right. But jumping from a kindergarten or a day centre to full-time primary school, and so the kids are used to being jumped around a bit, right? And then the primary is very good and very consistent, and then they've got to make another choice, right? And some, do you recommend from primary to the secondary? So if you finished at Beacon Hill, would they go to a secondary school? What could parents choose?
Yeah, so at ESF, when a student finishes year 6, the location of where they're living will impact the secondary option there for most of our schools.
And is it automatic entry?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's good, right?
Yes.
So for some schools, primary schools, they finish, and the parent has spent the year looking at other schools, saying, oh, have you got space? What's your criteria for entry? And so on. And it's another stress. I always say to the mums, you get stressed in this journey, because it's the mums that honestly do the back work, right? They just take it on their shoulders and they do it. And so I said, try not to get stressed, but just look at least 3 to 4 schools, and then put your name down on the waiting list. It's going to be expensive. Sorry, on the application, and go and see them. And then you might end up with 3 choices, you might end up with just one, right? That one will be mine, right?
So one of the advantages of the through train system is that children don't have to stress about entrance exams for secondary school. On the other hand, some critics would say that can lead to complacency, that because they don't have that kind of motivating factor. What are your opinions on this?
I think you're right. The danger for both the pupils and the school is complacency. And where the model has failed and schools are not doing terribly well, it's because everybody has just assumed that it's all there's no challenge. The reason why children, particularly in the United Kingdom, and I would imagine the same could be true here, but probably not as much, that there's quite a trend of children leaving through schools about midway through, somewhere between 11 and 13, because they know the physical site to within an inch of the boundary. They've explored every aspect of it. They know all about it, and as far as they know, in their sort of short lives, they're going to be there forevermore. There's nothing more to look forward to. That whole excitement of going to a new school, going to big school, going on to the next big thing. Unless schools manage this very carefully, it just gets boring and dull, and there's no challenge. So the challenge is on the school management and the teachers to construct the next phase, the next stage, move to different houses, different colours, different sports, all this kind of anticipation, because there is a real danger, because it is for such a long time, that academically, socially, in terms of clubs, sports activities, it just gets taken for granted, and it all gets a bit sleepy and a bit dull.
I disagree slightly in the fact that if any good institution should not be complacent. Honestly, I think they should be doing their utmost for the students and their needs and the drive. If they say, oh, there's no exams, don't worry, you'll move up. Actually, maybe we're sending the wrong message, and we should be saying it's a competitive environment. You know, we want you to move on in our school. We don't want you to leave. We want you to. You know the teachers in the through train school. You know the teachers. You know the specialist subject teachers. So it's yes. You know what you need for science. You know. We follow the UK program with Cambridge checkpoints, and that gives us in April. Every student does those, similar to the UK in Year 6. They do SATs. And it gives us a benchmark, and we find that local parents like those benchmarks. They ask us, if I join your school, will I do checkpoints? Will he do checkpoints? So we say yes, but the checkpoints are only a little marker. They are not the full spectrum of what your kid is capable of.
That's right.
And they say, well, what maths grade will he get? I said, will it affect him moving up to secondary? And I say, no, he'll still move up, but we'll group them in Year 7 according to the checkpoints. They're happy.
I think the continuous ongoing assessment, the continuous ongoing formative assessment, summative assessment, the standardised assessment certainly gives schools that allows them to keep their finger on the pulse. And I think for our students, that as long as there's breadth and depth to the curriculum, and the learning engagements outside of academics, social as well as academic, then students will constantly feel challenged, and they'll constantly feel part of a community that is moving forward together. So that's what we aim for in a through train education. The last thing anybody wants, is complacency.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What other ways do you guard against complacency then at your individual schools?
So teachers constantly are able to feed back, reflect with students where they are in their learning and in their learning journey, and they're also able to feed forward. So they're also able to work with students to help them understand their next steps in learning. And I think when that whole process of learning is demystified, students feel empowered. And it's when students feel empowered, they're able to actually pick up their interest, to reconcile their understanding, and to move forward in their education in a way that's meaningful to them.
I agree.
It's very interesting at the moment, being just at this stage of my career, at this stage of Wickham Abbey's journey, that we just have a primary school. The conversations I'm currently having with parents in the top 2 years, it's not really a question about will I get into a good school. It's going to be which one will I get into, and we really have quite a wide range of schools already, both in Hong Kong, UK, United States, who we're in touch with. And having worked in through trained schools for so long, it's actually quite refreshing to be on the other side for a short while we're at this stage of development.
Sure.
Because there is just such a wealth of choice we're currently giving parents. So I don't think it's a question that through train or non-through train is better. They are just different. And I think the comments we've been making about the through train model would apply to a non-through train model. It's all about stimulating students. It's all about offering excellence and quality, enrichment. And any school, regardless of what its model is, as long as it knows what it's trying to do, sticks to its model, plans to the model, and doesn't try to be all things to all people, it will be a good school.
Is it easy, let's say a family moves to Hong Kong with a child, and obviously they're not in like primary or early years, and they want to join a through train school later. How easy or difficult is it to kind of come in halfway through?
It's not difficult. Each school has its own assessment mechanisms and interview processes. We're always happy to receive families. We get quite a few families from Korea just coming in, especially around about February, March. And so we welcome them and we give them an assessment. Sometimes it's difficult because they've been in a school that's only working the Korean language. So we say, okay, let's have a look. We have families coming from the UK because we are a UK curriculum, and they're familiar with that, and they say, oh yes, I'm interested in IGCSE A-level. We treat every family, and I always say to new families who are looking around, see as many schools as you can. Get the feel of other schools, right? Look at the fees. It's a budget. How much budget have you got? Because education in Hong Kong is expensive. Look at your budget. What can you work out? And there are lots of schools out there that will welcome you. We're all losing students throughout the year anyway, and we're happy to receive. We don't close new families down. Do you still do the 2-year membership? No. So some schools say you can only join our waiting list if you've 2 years before your kid wants to start. You don't do that? No.
No, that's not our current practice. No. Yeah, and I think to add to that, it's important to understand that any transition is going to have an adjustment phase. So wherever students are coming from the local system, from outside of Hong Kong, from another international school, there's going to be a period of adjustment. And yes, in a similar way, we accept families at any point of the K to 13 learning journey. And there are strong pastoral programs in place and induction programs to help support not only the students, but I would say the families as a whole.
I think any good school needs, or would be by default, expert at helping children settle in quite early. If you track any child's sort of first year in a new school, if they've joined midstream, more times than not, if you look back a year later, you can see that for probably a couple of months, the child stood fairly dormant while they were just socially working out who are my new friends, how does this new group work, where do I fit in? And then if the school has supported well, which inevitably they will, parents feel well supported, well informed, the child is allowed to settle, within sort of a month or so they will really take off and you'll see the real newcomer. It's always a lovely day when that newcomer does something in the crowd and you think, hello, you've arrived, you've settled in. And I think it's something all schools of the age groups we teach by default are good at, but clearly a through trained school just means that it's easier for the family to settle in because they know they're there. Probably it's not going to be another move.
Not another move, and that's it. Right?
Exactly.
That's what we're going.
Given the strong ties between students, growing up together, and also the teachers and students, can we say that through trained systems are better at preventing bullying?
I think bullying is going to happen. anywhere to
Anywhere,
some stage.
right?
It's part of finding out who you are. Sooner or later, most children are going to try to impose their will on some other child, and it doesn't take much for that to tip over into trying it again, and then we get a repetition, and then we're into bullying, which is repeated imposition of your will on someone else. It's how the school deals with it, because it is going to
Always.
happen. Yeah, and I think any school is bound to deal with that very well, very quickly. I think part of the benefit of a through-trained school is you know your parents very well. Many times it's actually mum who picks up on the bullying. We all have our go-to-work face. We get through our day. Somebody who's being bullied, that sort of victim mentality, they smile through it, they try and shrug it off. Get home, mum says, "How was your day?"
Tears.
It all comes out at 5 o'clock in the
come.
evening.
Yeah.
And then if you've got that trust and that relationship that you've built up over a number of years, mum feels comfortable with just phoning the class teacher, phoning the deputy head or somebody, and just saying things are not right. And you know, I've often felt, in fact, I've known for a long time, mum knows best underneath it all.
Yeah, definitely.
Mum knows what's going on, and it's a sensible school that's built that relationship over time, that listens and then investigates and puts all the strategies in place to stop it.
And if you've got a good relationship with your parents, then they should feel at ease coming forward and saying, I feel there's something not quite right, or he's or she's very quiet and not saying anything, and then we will investigate. And sometimes it's a very small thing, right? It may not be bullying, but it may be bullying, but it may be just something very small that she doesn't know where to sit at the canteen or something like that. It can be anything, but mum sees it and tells the teacher because she's confident with the teacher. And as we're all in caring institutions, caring schools, so we would act on it.
Yeah. We certainly want our students to be happy and to be kind, and I think to be caring. That's how we want to build that culture of the school. And I think if circumstances like that take place, then schools will have, all good schools will have some practices in place to help restore relationships. So that is very much, I think, the power of a through train, because if something is happening towards the end of primary school, then the secondary school will actually be very well aware of that and continue with a consistent approach to be able to help students and parents manage that.
Flipping one of my earlier questions on its head, what if a family decides, for whatever reason, that the through-trained school they're in isn't quite what they expected, and then they look to swap to another secondary school, for instance? Is that still also a simple change to make? Are there any difficulties?
Sure, I think parents are powerful people, and they get the feeling that maybe this is not working for their kid, or they're having a particular struggle with something, or they need to have certain needs met. It's their choice. It's parents' choice, and they say, actually, I'm going to that school, right? And I always ask them, why are you leaving? What is it? Have we done something wrong? Don't you like the teacher? Is it my assemblies? And you never know, right? And you have to ask them, and they say, oh no, it's this or this. Sometimes they don't give you a reason. They just say, oh no, we're going to that school. And sometimes I lose students because they want to go to a boarding school in America. So they say, I want to go to that school so I have an easier chance to go to boarding school in America. Okay, fine. You're the parent. You make that call. I said, but we will be sad to see him go. We'll be sad to lose him. But your choice.
And I think the strength and the control that parents have, and perhaps a possibility before it gets to that stage, is get to know the schools well. So take a school tour, as we mentioned at the very beginning, get to know the feel of the school. Look at the beliefs and values. Really figure out if they're in line and in sync with your own and your family, what your family values, and hopefully that disruption of changing schools mid education, will no longer be the case. But it happens, and students and families either relocate or they make a decision based on their needs. And as far as assimilating into another context, then that is a transition that the school supports on either end.
I know you all obviously have different systems, but just to be clear for viewers and parents, through trained schools, it's not something where you need to be in their day one early years to sort of get on the escalator and to go through the school.
I think the successful model tends to be sort of like an inverted pyramid, a fairly small kindergarten, a slightly larger primary school, and even larger secondary school, because the through trained school benefits from that injection of waves of newcomers coming in. It dilutes the social mix, it stimulates it. If you just had a same size school going all the way through, I think that could be challenging for everybody. So these schools are expertly designed and successfully designed to welcome newcomers, normally at key stages, but at any other, life's not that straightforward. So at any other, as we've just been discussing, any other stage.
I mean, you talked there about Howard about the inverted pyramid. A charge against through schools can be that they narrow the experiences of pupils because the pupil stays at one school with one group of friends, one group of teachers, rather than moving from one school to another and perhaps getting more different experiences. Do you agree? Or
I don't in my experience, but then I've worked at schools that work very hard at continuing to raise the bar, the challenge, the stimulation, the resources, the range of activities, subjects. My experiences of groups of children year on year who are just can't wait to be to the next stage.
Yes.
It also helps socially. We've talked about children socialising well with people in their own classes. Of course, their mentors who are a year or two just ahead of them, the big kids who they always want to be, are just ahead of them for a very long time. And they can always see through the eyes of that person. And when somebody in the sort of penultimate year finally gets into the first team with the kids who've been in the year above them all that time, they're just made forever. And that doesn't have to be using a sporting example. That could be true in any range of the school. So I think these schools are successful because they recognise they've got children for such a long time, and they can build a structure that just keeps raising the bar and the range of their lives. It should constantly be exciting.
Definitely.
I agree with that. I think the breadth and the depth and the range of opportunities doesn't limit experience in any way, and that has been our experience as well, not only within a cluster and a network of schools, but also within Hong Kong, where this is a small, close community of all schools, of all systems, including the local system, and there's lots of opportunity for inter-school connections, for inter-school events, for friendly matches, for friendly get-togethers. So there is a lot of opportunity for breadth that we have.
No, definitely.
Great. What role do seniors play, Howard, in this system? Like you say, given that pupils can have them in front of them for so long.
I think leadership is one of the things that any good school is teaching, either consciously or by default. I was actually talking to my little 10-year-olds who are now house captains, all 3'6" of them. And we were talking about what it means to be a leader at a primary school when you're just a pupil yourself. And we were talking about how it's all about example. It's not about telling people what to do. I've said I don't want to ever hear any of you telling anybody what to do, but all day long you should be showing them how to do it just by the way you do it, whether it's your work, your behaviour, the way you're walking around the corridors. And if you sort of maximise that little example out across the school, mentors and colleagues and peers are encouraged to follow excellence, to pursue excellence in everything they do, including their relationships. And again, the longevity of the time allows them to work at that and get it right, because no one's going to get it right first time out.
No. But it's important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Very important.
It is. Student leadership is crucial.
Crucial.
And it's not just for the select few students either, it's for all students. like you mentioned, to have the opportunity to see those peers above them, to build those buddy peer-to-peer support programs that we all have in our schools, and to really utilise, I think, the role model and the expertise there. So whether that be in the academic domain, in the sporting domain, in the social domain, there's all kinds of programs that schools have in place, mentoring, coaching, buddy systems that really help to support that student leadership.
Sure. It's a win-win situation, really.
It really is.
And everybody, all the schools have got programs, right? Leadership programs, whether it's in primary or secondary, older kids working with younger kids, reading, just being 2 classes in the library, just buddy reading, that kind of thing. Or when we do our field study trips for Year 7, they go out and we do it every 2 weeks. We have field study, but the Year 10s go with them because they've done it and they know all the little bits. And if somebody gets stuck with their measuring stick, they say, "Oh, I'll show you."
Yes, yeah. And our secondary schools also. You reminded me actually when you were saying that, Chris. Our secondary schools have buddy programs with the primary students.
Yes.
So actually, to support that transition experience from one campus to another campus through the all through system, those buddy programs are crucial and key, and those friendships, I would say, remain for years, not just
When our new Year 7s come in, it's our Year 6 moving up, but also we get new families joining us, and our Year 13s come on the same day and say, "Hey, welcome to the school. You know, we're going to be your friend. We're going to, if there's any problems, come and talk to us. You know, we're in the sixth form room," and so on and so on. And it's a great leveller. It really is a win-win, honestly.
And it goes beyond the social aspect as well. You have older children. We had a study buddy scheme where 6th formers and 5th formers would weekly meet with the 1st or 2nd year or even top primary pupils. And by meeting with them and talking to them about their schoolwork, their studying, you've got 10, 11, 12-year-olds seeing that the cool kids, 16, 17, 18, are taking their studies very seriously and it's modelling this engaged learning we keep talking about. We can talk to children about becoming engaged learners, but boy, the minute one of your peer
students shows
evidences that they are really taking their studies seriously, so it draws the younger child on.
That's one of the advantages too of having mixed age learning situations. So when we put, for example, 7, 8s and 9s together in a learning situation, or 10, 11s and 12s together, then not only are they learning collaboration skills and all of those important skills that are needed, but they're also learning to break out from their year level and work with others, supporting others who maybe need that support in that buddy mentor relationship, but also observe older students. And sometimes it's older students observing younger students and their habits and how they approach their attitude to their schooling. That's important too.
It is important.
One question: is there a danger of differences in educational philosophy between schools or in the through system, or is it by default that it's all the way through from Year 1 to graduation?
I think for us, we're a through-trained school from reception to Year 13. The philosophy of the school is exactly the same, right? How we care about students, how we support students, how we want them to be challenged, how we want them to take part in community work. It's right the way through. So even though you've got a head of primary and a head of secondary, we speak as one voice all the time, and we measure ourselves as one voice. We do exactly the same. So you can't have, in primary we only do this and work like this, and then you've got to relearn something when you move into secondary. No, it's all one, right? We follow the same maths, and then we move into Cambridge maths, right? But it's the continuum. We don't say, "Oh, stop! We've got to stop here now and change."
Exactly, it's having a shared vision.
Yes,
and being very clear. To have that same shared vision, how it translates and looks like in individual school context is the autonomy of the school. However, to have that shared vision as an anchor point and the learning goals and all of the beliefs and values is key. So it allows school autonomy, but it also allows a consistent message for students so that there's a real anchor point for them.
Definitely.
I think when significant management changes happen at schools, parents sometimes wonder why it takes so long between the announcement that someone's leaving, a deputy head or a head, and the announcement for the next person arriving. It takes about a day to check everybody's qualifications. That's not the issue. It's how are the various candidates going to fit the group? Are they going to buy into or lead the ethos of the school together with the other leaders of the school that are already in place? And it's a critical decision for any school, and it's one that particularly the through schools, because it is such a continuity and there has to be such a united belief and focus. It takes a while to get these key positions resolved.
Trish, in particular, what are the transition systems within your schools? For instance, from primary to secondary. I know USF in particular has certain systems in place. So what are they?
We've approached transition very strategically. So we're looking at kindergarten into primary and also primary into secondary. That's not to say that the transition between, say, for example, year 3 to year 4 is not equally as important. We know it is. So we have a very strong transition program in both of those key points. And then, of course, the transition from year 13 to university is one of equal importance. So, and the transition into school, there are so many points of transition. When we look at those two key phases from kindergarten into primary and primary into secondary, really it's about communication with staff, communication with parents, and of course communication with students. It's about students feeling relaxed, happy, confident in their new school. Systems are set up so that students have an opportunity to go, visit, experience what their year 1 classroom look like and what the year 7 experience will be. There's all kinds of shared information that pass hands. So there's a wide variety of experiences, and I would say that, you know, probably much like other through train systems, our transition from primary to secondary isn't just about year 6 to year 7. It actually starts years before that. So our students are able to go to science labs in secondary and have lessons there. They're able to go and meet up with the secondary students and join a PE lesson. So, you know, that's just to name a few examples. So there's all kinds of structured, intentional experiences that are there for students and families, and the communication with families, I would say, is absolutely key.
I'm asked that question a lot at fairs, especially from local families who say, how will my kid who's been in this school, local school, transition into your school? What will you do to help him? Will he cope? What will happen if he doesn't? Right? And the differences between a local school curriculum with heavy homework on Chinese or something like that, how will he cope with the Chinese that you offer? Little things like that. We also help kids transition into the exam classes, so IGCSE and A-level, because some students might get stressed with it or anxious, so we have our counsellors work with them to say, you know, this is the program, you can do it. And that's where the older students come in and say, oh yeah, well I made those choices for IGCSE, the maths is good, right? And it lifts the kid, it lifts them up, and it's a transition.
Part of the transition is that the continuity supports it, particularly in the pastoral role. So from my sort of end of things as a primary head all these years, several times now, probably more than several, I've gone or had a call, could I come and talk to somebody, a distressed 14 or 15-year-old, who actually I've known since they were 3.5. And I can sit down with them in scary new big high school or whatever, you know, big challenge, somebody who they've known all that time and can help them be part of the team that's helping them through that crisis. So the transition never really ends because the support is that much deeper, and we have the knowledge, like a taxi driver has the knowledge of the whole child and their complete development.
We'll do one last question before we get to the audience questions. and that's, are there academic benefits to through train education? Do pupils come out with better results, do you think?
That's an interesting question. Again, it comes back to that first part of why the parent bought the ticket to join your school, that learning journey. And it might be that you're a school that at the end has very good results, and all A stars, blah blah, 45 points. Sorry, I put IB, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so it might be that they know that school has a history, a heritage of doing well in exams. And I get asked this question. I say, but I'm more interested in the person. Exams only say something about you, but you are more than the sum of your exams. You are a person, a global citizen, and I want to pass out the best global citizen as possible. But you're right, parents do say, oh, what's the academic track? What do you like? We're a young school as regards A-level. We've only been doing it for 7 or 8 years. So we don't have the vast background of many international schools who've got 20 years of results. We don't have that. We're fresh, we're new, right? And I say that, we're fresh, we're new, right? But I don't want to be seen as just being an academic school. I don't, right? And I'm honest with parents, I will say that to them. Education is not just about getting it right on the day or we're finding now there's been no exams, right?
Yes.
No exams. It's all down to teachers, and teachers know best.
That's right.
Honestly.
It's a holistic approach.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
And we don't value one more than the other. And you know, our system, we've been primary through secondary, through train for a long time, decades. And our results from ESF have certainly been outstanding, world leading. However, you know, I don't actually have any research to back that up. What we can speak from is from experience. So that's been our experience.
I think it'd be interesting to extend the question. I think academic results are a pretty finite thing. If you look at the top schools, consistently top 3 in the UK on academic results, for example, they tend to be highly selective, secondary schools only. And that's just the way it is. But then they can choose their students.
Yeah, sure.
I think to extend the question, to get the full value of what you're asking, we've got lots of data about which schools get which children into which universities. We haven't got quite so much data about the number of children who actually graduate and complete the university course. And for a child who's had that social strength of coming from a through school, has that security, that self-confidence, that massive buddies around them, they probably have a greater chance, a greater platform to succeed throughout life. Possibly, they certainly would have a slight advantage over somebody who's had a more disrupted schooling.
Sure. I cite to the parents who ask about the academic, I say 2 years ago I had a student who, when we did our hopes and dreams with him in year 9, he said, I'm not that interested in IGCSE results. He said, I want to be a racing car driver. That's what I want to do. And I said, well, okay, well, why don't you do the IGCSEs and get a background, and then we'll help you secure what you want to do. So we did, and now he's racing in Germany with Audi, and he's done very well. And they're also helping him study at university. So he got both. He got the background in case racing fell apart and he had nothing to do, but he also met his dream to race, and he does Formula 3 now. It always works well with the parents, it really does.
Yeah, I think if we support the holistic child, I mean, I know my 2 children have graduated and gone through the ESF system, and whenever they're in a new place, in a new university, which one has just started this year, be it online, there's a real network there. And I'm sure you'd agree with your systems, with the all through system, there is such such a strong bond, and those relationships are so strong that there's this network of alumni, so they constantly feel supported. And the fact, I think, coming from such an international context like Hong Kong really allows that assimilation into wherever they end up in the world to be a relatively nice stepping stone for them. And it's really our job to help equip them with the life skills to be able to be successful after, because it doesn't all stop at year 13.
No. You'll notice more and more in school curriculums they're doing life skills work at the top end of the school in years 11, 12 and 13. And when I talk to parents about it, it's because sometimes the biggest transition is when they leave year 13 and go to university. And suddenly they're on their own. Right, mum and dad have said goodbye at the, you know, and then they've got to do their washing, they've got to make their meals,
organise their finances,
right? And suddenly there's a lot of things going on. So we've been looking at programs to give them reassurance, self-confidence that when they make that jump, that they're not on their own. That they, you know, they can go and knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, I'm new. Can I sit with you?" Right? The biggest transition is university.
Let's move on to the audience questions
Oh,
now.
right, okay.
And there's still time for the audience to send in questions, so please feel free to continue to do so. So our first one comes from Eugene the Grammar, who asks whether we agree with the new norm of online learning. Who wants to tackle that? Trish?
There are, you know, we've done a lot of thinking around this. The last 4 months in Hong Kong have given us lots of opportunity for reflection. So what we're looking at is saying what's worked well and what do we want to bring back with us into this new normal of education. We know that we're not going to be looking at distance learning and an online learning model forever. However, what we do want to do is harness the powerful elements from the digital experience and from the experience at home to remain when we go back to school in a full-time 100% capacity. So I think in trying to answer that question is a difficult one, because I think all schools do not recognise that the online environment, particularly for our younger students and our primary school students, it's not necessarily an easy space to be in, and I would say for our families too. However, there have been components that have been rich and rewarding. Things like quick Zoom sessions with parents to touch base how their children are going. Things like having students be travelling and be able to come in to join the session. Things like sending home some unplugged, if you like, learning kits, and then following up the learning online. And there's got to be a blend of synchronous and asynchronous. So live, face-to-face, and also pre-recorded content, if you like, and unplugged. We certainly don't want our students sitting in front of a screen for 6 or 7 hours a day. No. That wouldn't be a thing that we would like to carry forward.
We spent as much time bussing out art materials, library books, projects, things for children making and doing, simply to try and balance the screen time during the core 4 months we were closed down. I think clearly we've all come on, none of us would have anticipated the technological leaps we've all made by necessity through this year. But I don't think it will ever compensate for the social aspect of learning, the collaborative classroom activity that is really such a core aspect of learning. That's hard to get that through even sort of group Zoom chats. That would be a very tough one, and we've certainly noticed, particularly our younger children below the age of 7 noticeably, who are really having to learn to re-socialise again these last 2 or 3 weeks we've been open. We've been open all day, we're doing lunches and afternoon activities, so we're getting them for the full day. And their capacity, their fitness, if you like, to last the full school day is definitely down on what it was before Christmas. They just can't I mean, the last 2 weeks has been remarkable. We're almost back to normal, but it was, as a social experiment, you would never have imposed it on anyone.
No,
but it has been
exactly.
fascinating. Yeah.
It has. One of the things we noticed when our secondary came back, they came back first, was that they were happy to be back in school. They all said, "Oh, fantastic!
Absolutely,
Yeah, they were happy to be back in school. This is my year 10s, 12s, all happy to be back in school." But also, they were also happy, even though I kept saying social distancing, they were grabbing each other and putting their arm around each other and saying, "Hey, great to see you again. You know, I haven't seen you for 12 weeks." You know, and you can't replace that. You can't replace that personal contact.
No.
That involvement, that it's been so sad that we couldn't have carried on with our sports program, but we tried to make other ways, like you have said, to get the kids to come together, right? And sadly, I say goodbye on Monday to all my year 13s, 12s, they're gone, right?
Yes.
So,
The next question comes from Angel Chen, who says, as you all three are from through trained schools, are there differences between primary and secondary schools on the same campus?
differences. For us, the differences might be size of class. Our primary is always 25, but our secondary may not be. We have more subject teacher orientation for secondary, whereas primary is a homeroom teacher, if you like. Some people call it a homeroom teacher, we call it a class teacher, who tends to do many subjects with the class. In secondary, it's a tutor or an advisor who works with groups of children. So there's differences like that. Differences in opportunity. Do field study trips out into the mountains for the older students. So there are differences like that. Do they mean differences in philosophy?
I mean, they might do, I can't say.
No. Okay.
It's probably structure, as you say. Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a different, but there'd be a change of structure whether you were changing buildings.
Changing build, yeah.
Yes.
Or changing schools. You're going from a primary school to
That's
another
right.
new secondary.
Primary schools are much more integrated in their approach to the curriculum and
Yes.
learning and teaching,
Yeah.
whereas to your point, secondaries are much more, if you like, specific, or they start generalised and then they go into those specific subjects that
Sure.
students will continue to study up until year 13. So it does look different. Our secondary schools also tend to be physically larger than primary schools and then kindergarten, looking at that inverted triangle approach. So yeah, besides the physical distances, the class setup is similar. Class sizes will vary depending on the particular subject, I would say.
I think that very difference comes back to our earlier point that that's part of the reason for drawing children on, because those first few exciting weeks when you're at senior school and you've got all these new teachers and you've got to get a little bit lost and learn the geography of this much bigger building, it's something that's something that children really look forward to. And of course they've all got tales to tell for the younger ones to bring them on.
Got a couple of school-specific questions here. Barty S. wants to know from Howard, when will Wickham Abbey offer secondary school in Hong Kong?
Sorry, go on.
And the second part is, and does Wickham Abbey offer exchange programs with the UK school?
Thank you. We're hoping to have our plans ready to share with Hong Kong during 2022. We currently have options on several sites in the new territories, and I think at the moment I'm not particularly part of this project. My focus is on our school in Aberdeen, but I think they're now finalising on one site and design will start. We're currently building through schools in Huanzhou and Nanjing. They're both a year away from completion. And we have another one in Changzhou, so do look at Wickham Abbey Changzhou website to get an idea of the kind of size of scale of the campuses of all the other Wickham Abbeys in this part of the world. The aim is for the Wickham Abbey Senior School, it will have its own junior school attached up in the new territories. It will offer full boarding, weekly boarding and day. So children who are coming from my school, for example, children who live on the island, might like to weekly board because it's just a long way to drive backwards and forwards to new territories every day, and that again might be something to look forward to. In terms of a link with the seniors, with the British school, we have great relationship with Wickham Abbey, which is only a girls' school. So of course 50% of my pupils don't qualify anyway because they're boys. Joe Duncan, the head, and I, we speak regularly. One of their staff sits permanently in our office, their administrative staff. So we have a very close link with them. But Wickham Abbey Girls' School is a highly selective school. It's one of those top 3 selective, and that selectivity applies to everybody. I would say the advantage to being at Wickham Abbey, Hong Kong, is that you're studying the same curriculum as children in British prep schools who are preparing for Wickham Abbey and similar schools. We're basically a British prep school that's come to Hong Kong. We're not an international school, we're a private school. So there is no limit of passport quotas in our case, similar to ESF, I believe. Same.
Yes,
yes.
we have passport restrictions.
Oh, right, okay,
yes.
sorry. Yeah.
Good
Anyway,
time.
I digress. But
Not passport,
it's
but
private school as well.
right. Okay, so always an interesting point for parents to check on the difference between a private and international school as you're considering these things. But yes, you're advantaged in that you get the same curriculum, the same teachers as you would in UK for a British prep school preparing for the same schools. But it would need to be right for the girl to go through. It's got to be. It's the same for any school selection. It needs to be morally right to put that child in that environment. Will they flourish? Will they do well? Or are we just setting them up to fail because we fancy the name of the school, which would be immoral.
Well, we've got to end it there, unfortunately. But thank you, panelists, for joining us today, and thank you to the English Schools Foundation, Korean International School, and Wickham Abbey Hong Kong for your generous support. You can meet representatives from ESF and Korean International School at the SCMP's Kindergarten Festival next week on June 20th at the JW Marriott. Hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you also for our viewers who've sent in questions, and thank you for joining us online. We hope to see you at our next webinar or event. Goodbye.